sports. Welcome in here to Slaughterhouse Sports, and I wanted to talk about the two title games in the National Football League, and know that I do a lot of content on college and the NFL. Wanted to do about a 10, maybe 15-minute video just on the emotions that I've just felt. The game ended, I would say, several hours ago, and then I actually, mulled over it more and took an actual nap, I guess, and, it's late here and wanted to record a video. So, let's talk about the Detroit Lions, and let's talk about this journey that they've just had. Dan Campbell, one of my favorites in the business. Dan is somebody that was a special teams coach on Sean Payton's staff in New Orleans. He got a chance as an interim coach with the Dolphins, and just a legendary guy. I mean, his speech, when he first got to Detroit about, biting kneecaps and, his whole, thing about grit and how the team's going to outlast you and how they're going to draft guys that embody just the spirit of Detroit and the people and the hard work. And it's amazing. What they've built in Detroit, last year it showed everything about this year, when they had Aiden Hutchinson and Sewell, and, the Rams were in position to beat Seattle. And honestly, the Lions then had their playoffs hopes crushed, and they started out last year, I want to say 2-6, and finished it with at 9-8. So you guys remember last year they reeled off all of those wins down the stretch, and then they had nothing to play for against Green Bay but keeping the Packers and Aaron Rodgers out of the playoffs. And then Aaron Rodgers' last game at Lambeau Field, Jared Goff and these Lions with Ben Johnson, they came out there and they finished the job. And they finished Green Bay and had nothing to play for and didn't let the circumstances determine how they were going to play. And that attitude helped it to this year. And when I watched the Lions this year, I saw a team that was winning games late in the third and fourth quarter. Amon-Ra St. Brown had an incredible year. Jared Goff was lights out all season long. The defense was up and down this year, honestly. The secondary wasn't that good in a lot of spots. They went to Chicago and lost, and Green Bay would come in there with Jordan Love on Thanksgiving and tear them up. But the team just continued to fight. And even against Dallas, against the really good teams, they would play their best football against, really good teams. And they went to Kansas City and won, and, they were just a solid team. The offense was really good, and the defense was opportunistic, and the defense and Aiden Hutchinson can get enough pressure and can make enough plays. So now now let's recap what happened with Detroit. They started off against Matthew Stafford. Old quarterback comes home. A quarterback who never won a playoff game in Detroit, but who had a lot of numbers, took a lot of hits for this franchise, and gave them a couple of playoffs and gave them a lot of memories of big-time throws to Calvin Johnson and Theo Riddick and, the other, Lions receivers of that time. I'm trying to even think of the Lions like Roy Williams, or I'm trying to even think of Lions receivers that played with Stafford. Golden Tate played a lot of years, I think, with Matthew Stafford. So I'm sorry. I'm just trying to remember the guys that played with Stafford. So anyway, they had that emotion of their former player coming home, and Jared Goff is in that game, and Jared Goff's the guy that they needed to give draft picks up to. Well, the Rams needed to literally give the Lions first-round picks to say, can you get this contract off of our hands? This guy's no good. This guy's not going to be good. And, I fought, honestly, for a pretty long while that Jared Goff was a bridge quarterback and that they were going to draft somebody and they weren't going to go anywhere with Jared. But the fact that Jared Goff was leading this offense, the fact that he was playing the cleanest football of his career at 29 years old, guys in his absolute prime, in his peak, Ben Johnson is a godsend. And, this whole team, Sam Laporta was absolutely necessary, and so was Jahmyr Gibbs, and Amon-Ra St. Brown was just incredibly crucial, and Josh Reynolds made tons of plays all season long, and there's a lot of players who stepped up. A lot of players stepped up for this Lions team. Jameson Williams. So today, they beat the Rams. They survived that game when the defense doesn't play well. They beat Tampa decisively. They get fortunate that Green Bay beats the Cowboys. They don't have to go back to Dallas. They get a home game against a team they should beat, and they do. The Rams game was really the best game maybe in Lions history, beating Matthew Stafford, seeing Jared get revenge, and seeing the city experience these playoff wins. And then they were 2 away. They were 2 games away from being an immortal football team and being the last one standing. And they're out there in San Francisco, and they get off to a dream start. And they're playing the perfect game. Jarrett's hitting everybody. Jahmyr Gibbs is absolutely unstoppable. Sam Laporta. That offense was just humming on all. Jared Goff had all day to throw the ball. You couldn't even feel the 49ers. You couldn't feel Chase Young or Bosa or Greenlaw or Warner or Armstead or anybody. That D-line that's paid so much money, the Lions completely were doing whatever they wanted. Defensively, they were getting timely holds on the 49ers, and you're playing a guy in Kyle Shanahan who can't come back. You're playing somebody that never can come back, who always has to play with the lead, who wants to rely on bully ball and smash it to McCaffrey. And I'm sitting there at half, and I'm texting people like, "Oh my gosh, the Detroit Lions are going to be playing against Kansas City, and it's going to be the repeat of Week 1." You're up by 17, and your offense looks like it's going to go out there and score 40 points, and you're playing a quarterback in Brock Purdy that's in his first playoff game. And I was thinking, man, the Green Bay Packers really blew it because the Niners are just not that good of a football team. They're just not good. Their defense is not good. The way they were throwing the ball, and the Lions, I was like 6 quarters away. I can't believe that they're going to pull this off with Dan Campbell. I was stunned the way that game started. Then the second half came, and it played exactly how I thought the game would play out. The 49ers have Christian McCaffrey, and you weren't going to stop Christian McCaffrey, and you weren't going to stop Kittle, and a defense that ultimately got thrown on by Baker Mayfield and Jordan Love and Justin Fields all season, resorted back to being a kind of average defense. Even though they were playing so well, I thought they had the momentum, and they should have taken the field goal to make it a 3-score game. They missed out on points there. They fumbled the ball, just horrible mistake. That was a devastating mistake. They pass interfered on a 50-yard play. So in the second half, you basically don't attempt a field goal to get you points in a necessary spot. You give up a 60-yard bomb, and then you follow that up with coughing up the football, and the Niners recovered, and then it was a new game. So if you were going to tell me before that second half that, and I knew up 24-7, it just felt so good. It felt right. It felt like the Lions were, peaking at the right time, and kind of like Kansas City, they were a team that was pretty dang good all year, and they're going to figure it out. And it felt like that. And the fact that they gave up that 60-yard bomb to Ayuk, and that fumble with Gibbs, that exchange, I mean, those two guys are never going to get over that. They can go out there and win 4 Super Bowls. That's something you never forget. That's something that is never going to be erased from memory. I mean, where you were watching that game and that fumble is going to be stitched in your mind the rest of your life. If you're a Detroit fan, it is. If you're a football fan, you're going to remember that fumble and that play. You're going to remember these fourth downs and the points that Dan Campbell didn't make. And Brock Purdy made tons of plays. And if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl, you'll definitely remember this game. But if not, if the Niners don't beat the Chiefs, then, I mean, the team who wins, you always forget wins, I believe, faster than you forget losses. So I guess it's what makes sports great, is the finality of it. Ironically, it's the thrill of victory, and it's the agony of not being able to come back and work with, work with your team anymore. I mean, the 23 Lions are gone. Ben Johnson's going to be gone. There's going to, the free agents are all going to leave. But maybe the guys can come back again. Maybe there can be some cohesion here, and it's up to Dan Campbell to continue to get the right pieces in place to replace Ben Johnson and his offensive brilliance. But I don't know. It's so hard. You look back at that Washington Redskins staff that had Jay Gruden. They had Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, and Sean McVay on that staff. And Dan Campbell, he doesn't call good, and he was a play caller. I mean, he doesn't call offense like Ben did. And how else are you going to get a coordinator like Ben Johnson? And if I were Dan Campbell, honestly, and talking to Sheila, I mean, you pay all this money for practice facilities and all of that. I think Ben Johnson might just be the most important, person in your organization, even more than Jared and even more than Dan, because that offensive intellect and that brilliance is really hard to find. And if I were Dan, I mean, I'm not sure what I would do. I mean, I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to step down from being a head coach. But you want to keep Ben Johnson, and you want to keep Ben and Jared together. And I don't know if you would just turn into a special teams coach that's able to do speeches before the game, or if Sheila is able to pay Ben Johnson the same money as Campbell. And I guess Ben Johnson in Washington, I guess, like, there's certain things, there's certain players he would have drafted that Dan didn't. There's certain ways of practice that he would do it that Dan Campbell wouldn't. So, but the culture of Dan and the way the defense plays tough and the way the guys battle and fight all the time, that's all Campbell. And getting those linebackers and building the tight end position with Sam Laporta, like, that's all Dan Campbell did improve this roster and this team. But Ben Johnson is a brilliant play caller, and you got to have people under him that can still get similar production and not fall off a dang cliff. So I don't know how they're going to replace that going forward, but they're going to have to win a Super Bowl in these next 2 years, or this whole thing unfortunately came up short. But I would say that 95% of NFL teams and people, they don't win these Super Bowls. The only teams that pretty much win it, you look back at the 90s, it was the Dallas Cowboys and the 49ers. And you look back at this whole span of history, and it's New England and Kansas City. They're the only teams that are going to win it. And Kansas City throughout the regular season. Now to move on to Kansas City. Kansas City had a poor regular season. They just played in a terrible division. They played in a division that fired 2 coaches. They played in a division that Russell Wilson and Sean Payton never got along, so they benefited from the AFC West not being a great division. Even Antonio Pierce and that Raiders team with a rookie quarterback and Aiden O'Connell came in and beat Kansas City in Arrowhead. The Lions won in Arrowhead. The Eagles did. They went to Green Bay, and what did they win? 11 games? I mean, they didn't have the receivers were all terrible. I mean, Scantling, Kadarius Toney, they're relying on a rookie in Rashee Rice. Travis Kelce's old, only plays like half of the dang snaps. But yet the Kansas City Chiefs are probably going to end up winning the Super Bowl again. So, and being the best team all year. And the way that they're doing it is because they have the best defensive coordinator in the NFL. And their quarterback's the best in the NFL. And even though during the regular season they were a complete mess, they just flipped the switch. And they're a flip-the-switch team. Whenever they need to win a game, they're going to do it. And they dominated this game with defense. Against Buffalo in that second half, they were able to win with defense. And they're able to win whatever game you want to play. I mean, that's the great thing about Kansas City. I mean, Buffalo put up a ton of points, but yet the running game of Kansas City and then Travis Kelce turning back the clock, I'm just completely stunned that Kansas City's in the Super Bowl. I really am. I'm stunned that Mahomes and Kansas City's in because they don't have the Tyreek Hill player. And then last year, you have Juju Smith-Schuster. Kelce was just a lot better last year. Your offensive coordinator, Bieniemy, is there. The offense was really good last year, and they were able to. The road to the Super Bowl last year was beating Jacksonville and then beating Cincinnati at home. And I know that Mahomes was injured last year in the playoffs, but still, this year they had to beat the Dolphins, red-hot team. They had to go to Buffalo and win a game there. And then the Ravens were incredible. I mean, the Ravens have 2 head coaches on their staff. The Ravens have Lamar Jackson had the best year of his career this year. A resurgence for Lamar Jackson after a couple of years where he wasn't in MVP form. He was at peak of powers, Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews and Nelson Aguilar and Odell Beckham. You have experienced receivers, Rashad Bateman. They're healthy. They're in Baltimore. You have Roquan and Patrick Queen and Kyle Hamilton at peak of powers. The defensive tackles, Brent Urban, this D-line, Humphrey, Stevens. The secondary is amazing. There's no holes on this Ravens defense, and yet, Kansas City, Mahomes and Kelce are just able to make plays when they need to. And then defensively, Kansas City I know they have Chris Jones, but Karlaftis was huge in this game. Their linebackers made plays, Snead to strip Zay Flowers from going into the end zone. And the Ravens were too wound up for this game. They had Ray Lewis there speaking, and it was their first playoff AFC title game that they've hosted in franchise history since the 70s. And they got too wound up in the moment, and they pressed a little bit. Lamar Jackson pressed the ball in the triple coverage, and they got away from their running game, and they panicked when they were down by 10, even though their defense was balling. And they could have taken their time and run some more conservative plays on offense and taken field goals, in this game and not turned it over. And they would have figured out a way to beat Kansas City, but they didn't. And Kansas City showed more poise because Kansas City's been there before. So it doesn't matter if you have better players than Kansas City. They have coaching and they have quarterback, and it doesn't make any sense to me. The Ravens were the number 1 team all year. They went to the 49ers and won, and the result doesn't make any sense. The Chiefs were flawed. They didn't score any points in the second half. They only have like a tight end who's decent. They don't really have any wide receivers to speak of. But yet Mahomes can throw for 200 yards and miss 5 throws and literally complete like 85% of his passes and just play like the best games of the year in the playoffs. You can ignore the entire season with Kansas City. You can ignore it. And they played in a weak division, but they had to go on the road and do it. And that's why I give so much credit to Kansas City. This is not a great Kansas City Classic team. Last year's team was better. Last year's team went on to win the division, the team that usually they're hosting AFC championships. And the team that honestly lost to Cincinnati with Joe Burrow is a better football team with Tyreek Hill and the weapons. So, but this defense is cooking right now. Their defense is playing great. The back end, the secondary, like McDuffie's fantastic. Defense is playing really well. So, and all year the defense has actually been really good. It's just the offense has kind of been a mess all year. I don't think it's like a historically great Kansas City team. I just think that they're winning these games in January. And then they're going to win a Super Bowl. So on one end, you have two incredible teams in the Lions and the Ravens that are the best teams in their franchise's history. And none of them are going to get to a place that an average Chiefs team is going to go because of Mahomes and Andy Reid. So you think about it like that. And the history of playing in these games, of actually achieving the goal, that's the thing that is getting the teams by in the postseason. It's history and pedigree that win, and it's experience that's really winning these games. And San Francisco has the experience, Kansas City does, and the newer teams like the Lions and the Ravens, who haven't had an AFC championship in a long time, they weren't able to perform to the way that they needed to. In these spots. It's what makes the Eagles' run last year that much more impressive. Because, I know Purdy got injured, but they were able to play at home and play great. And it's so hard to make it to a Super Bowl. So, man, oh man. I don't think the Lions are going to be back for a while. I think that Baltimore has a better chance of coming back. I think this is maybe the best chance Jared's ever going to have at a Super Bowl, kind of like Jimmy Garoppolo. And within a couple of years, he can be out of quarterbacking and out of the league. And probably not going to win the division. I don't even know about next year. It's all about this year. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about this. We're going to break it all down some more. Maybe have a guest on the show and really dissect these two games. I mean, they were amazing games. Amazing results. And the fact that Kansas City wins the AFC and San Francisco gets it together. The Niners have always been really good all year. They've always been the class of this conference. They make sense in the Super Bowl. Kansas City really doesn't make any sense. I know that it's Mahomes and Reid and they're the defending champs, but their offense has been pitiful all year. Then Rashee Rice and then Marcus Valdes-Scantling makes the play of the game to seal the game away. Makes that catch. I mean, he hasn't made that catch all season. What an amazing catch. I mean, that was the game, that third down play, or else the Ravens can get another chance to go down and score. How does he make that catch? He hasn't made it all season. I mean, that's one of the biggest plays in franchise history, that long ball on third down to win the game. I mean, Mahomes throws a perfect ball. I mean, Travis Kelce all year has been a shell of himself. He's dropping passes. He looks like he looks like an okay tight end, and then he turns into a superhero in the playoffs. Like that switch, that on-off switch is just the heart of a champion, I mean. And when you've done it before, there's such a dangerous out. And they can end up winning this whole thing. And again, like, they get shut out in the second half. But however they need to win it. If San Francisco is going to score 35, then Travis Kelce is going to have 4 touchdowns. And what you've watched all year through the 17 games, if you've seen a team in Kansas City, they lose some games here or there, and they look really sloppy. And I was thinking Kansas City would go to Buffalo and lose because I didn't think they had it this year. But the fact that they're going to be the champions and maybe go on to win this entire league without having their A game from September to December, it speaks volumes to the way that we watch football and the way that we care about the regular season and the way that we view the totality of the entire season. It means that when you have one of the best quarterbacks to play the game and you have one of the best coaches to play the game, that it doesn't matter who your supporting cast is, that whenever there's a football game, you're going to have the upper hand. And that's crazy. I mean, this Baltimore defense was a historically great defense. Lamar Jackson's he's a multi-time MVP winner, probably. Going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback in his own right. You're in Baltimore, and this defense is just incredibly talented. The tight end play and receiver plays better on Baltimore. But Kansas City's defense today was just amazing, and their defense has been good, I guess, all year. And going back to Miami, and they have a defensive-led football team with a quarterback who knows how to win these games. And great defensive game. Great defensive game. I can't, beating Baltimore like that. I mean, this is the Ravens probably their best chance that they're going to have, and they might win one. They could have probably won 2 or 3. If the Ravens won this year, I think Lamar would have maybe won 2 in his career. But now it's going to be a fight just to get 1. And for the Lions, the odds of them winning even 1, if they won this year, they were probably just going to win 1. They might not ever get back to an NFC championship game in a long time. But Dan Campbell has raised the profile of that franchise, that's for sure. Alrighty, guys. Man, oh man. Again, we can dissect this all day, and we're going to have more shows about it. So excited to get to talking about the Super Bowl and previewing what's going on with the pro game.